Happy weekend, everybody. I thought I'd take some time just to give a status update on the 3 primary projects I'm working on. I'm mainly focused on just putting out videos and really hammering away at the Chilli Sub. So the first route we're going to start with today is my interpretation of Conrail in North Jersey, which includes some areas of Pennsylvania, which is where we're starting here. And we're just going to kind of look at where the progress is. And for some of you, understand why the route hasn't been released in Trainz New Era, is a lot of content did not come over from TS12. And then we'll hop along to the St. Louis line, which is another Conrail-based project, which can easily be operated as CSX in the early 2000s. And then lastly, progress on the Chilli Sub, which really making a lot more progress than I thought I'd be. So right now we're going to start in the staging area of the Trenton Line. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the area, the Trenton Line operates from just under the Art Museum in Philadelphia, and where the former break between CSX and Conroe was. It starts at a point called West Falls, runs up through Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and then crosses the Delaware River into New Jersey, just past West Trenton. And the primary place we start our journey here is going to be coming out of the staging yard. It's a small staging yard, and I'll get into that in here in a second. And one of the reasons that I love this route is that have an emotional tie to it, as my grandmother had a apartment right down the street from it, and as kids, my brother and I would watch trains right here at this little commuter station. So SEPTA is the commuter provider for the Philadelphia area, and this is the West Trent Line, the R3 West Trent Line, as it's been known for some time. This is a former Reading route, if you want to go way back in history, and really has seen the amount of traffic kind of flux down after the Conrail takeover, and I'll touch on that a little bit here as well, and that's really why I'm trying to model it in the era of Conrail. So what we have here is a little, this is the Bucks County Industrial Park, a couple small industries which are accessible by CSX and formerly Conrail through utilizing this interlocking down here, which is CP Wood. So what it allows you to do for the locals that will be running on the route is come down here to Wood, cross over, and then actually shove back down into the industrial track. So I like the complexity that freight has to cross the passenger main in order to serve these industries, and that local is based out of here, out of Woodburn Yard, which is a small yard, handles the Bucks County Industrial Park, and then we'll also handle this, which is a more or less a interchange track for the same railroad. So this is supposed to represent the connection of at Fairless to the yard at Mooresville, and basically how this will work is that a local will come out, spot cars in the outbound track, pull cars from the receiving track, and then bring them back in here into Woodburn to classify for outbound trains. One of the reasons I thought Woodburn was just interesting to model in general, outside of the industry piece, the commuter piece, is that the yard stub ended for the most part, and the signaled section is both the inside main as well as the outside. So the signals on both sides, and then we have the primary main line here, where all the intermodal trains and non-work event trains will run right here next to the passenger main. There's a small station here, Woodburn, and then the line continues towards New Jersey. So this coming across the top here is the Mooresville line. So this runs from Abrams, which is in Norristown, a suburb of Philadelphia, over to the mixed-use yard in Mooresville. Mooresville has 2 parts from a freight railroad perspective. It's an intermodal yard. A lot of it is high-priority UPS traffic, or in the Conrail era, mail traffic, and also a small manifest or merchandise yard for local customers that are served off the back side of the yard as well as on the northeast corridor. So in real life, if you were to follow this all the way, it actually dumps out on the Amtrak just by the Delaware River, and the control points escape me, but I believe it's CP Morris is right there before you cross the river, named from Morrisville. The only trains, this is mainly here just for effect, as well as to have trains be able to come across the top. And then we've got a small 2-track staging yard over here because we don't plan on using this a whole lot. Woodburn's kind of interesting because of this, which is a connecting track that runs down and connects the two lines. This was built in the mid-90s through the Conrail double stack project, which was partially funded by the state of Pennsylvania. Previously, the only double stack cleared routes out of North Jersey were via New York. One was called the Southern Tier, and that was the original route Conrail used, which cuts up through Suffern, East Binghamton, and then to Buffalo. And then they moved a majority of their double stack traffic to the River Line, which is a little more famous and much denser, which operates up through Albany, Selkirk, and then along the water level route. So in the mid-90s, state of Pennsylvania and Conrail partnered on a project to clear for double stacks, which included the Pittsburgh line between Harrisburg and Pittsburgh, in order to run double stacks through the state of Pennsylvania. So this connecting track here only sees 2 trains a day in current operation, 2 CSX trackage rates trains that operate via NS on the Mooresville line, and then get back here on the CSX Trenton Sub to head into South Conroe, North Jersey. But back in the late 90s, prior to the takeover, Conrail started shifting some of their double stack and automotive traffic onto the Mooresville line and this connecting track. So it was a piece I felt, you know, kind of deserved some attention. And then these come together right here in terms of the Mooresville line and the connecting track. And then right now, I've yet to go to the staging yard. But more to come on this area, and we'll kind of jump around and pass through some areas which aren't quite scenic. This is where a lot of content just did not come over well from TS12, and I've just removed it and kind of start fresh. This will be the Delaware River crossing, and then into West Trenton, which is pretty similar to how it was before, if you've seen some of the other videos on the line. The only thing I've done is I have added one industry down here, because there was at one time, during the Conrail era, industry served off the backside of the West Trenton station, and so I've just added something here, which I haven't really decided what we're going to do. I think it's going to be paper or something along those lines, so we'll see box cars, etc. The Trenton Sub then curls over, and before, we actually had a whole peninsula for the Trenton Line through Wing, etc. And I really want to build out some other areas, and so I've cut this way down, so we immediately go from West Trenton into the yard at Manville. So Manville's important because that is where the Lehigh line, which is dead ends right here right now, and the Trenton Line come together here at CP Ihb Junction, and then head east towards North Jersey. So this will be a small industrial yard, a little bigger than the yard at Woodburn, and will serve industries on the Lehigh line, as well as a shoreline interchange in Boundbrook. So you can see a lot left here to do. I'm basically starting this area from scratch as well as we move into Boundbrook. It's another control point, and where the New Jersey Transit Raritan Valley line comes parallel. This will be an interchange with a small short line that serves customers off the Raritan line. Like I said, a lot to do here. Off to the right, this line breaks off onto basically my refurbished Kemmel Port Reading Secondary, which runs into the south side of the North Jersey terminal area into Port Reading, and we'll kind of catch up with that as we go along. So the lines will be parallel through here as they were in the TS12 version. I've completely reworked CP Potter and moved it. This is one of the last things I did in TS12. And then up here at Aldine is where the two lines, the New Jersey Transit Raritan Valley line and the Lehigh line, come together. So a lot of activity here, and then you can see the Port Reading secondary has reappeared here below. This is more or less visible / hidden. Won't be heavily scenic because these lines don't run this close to each other, but it's there for effect, so you can get kind of upper and lower trains moving at the same time, which I really enjoy about model railroading. So from Aldine, we head down through what could be a number of stations between Oak Island and Aldine, And up here is MK, and like I said, this could be a number of stations. So here with Roselle Park, we now head further east. This is an industry built off the Port Reading secondary. In real life, it's actually off this little connecting track down here off the Hunter connection. But from a space perspective, we just put it here. Not a lot of operational complexity to the Port Reading secondary versus just a refinery located closer to Port Newark. So here's MK. MK is short for Newark. And what we've got is a pretty complicated control point, and with the New Jersey Transit Hunter connection running down towards the Northeast Corridor, and then the Lehigh line verging off here right towards Oak Island. We come over the Northeast Corridor, which is just a small loop. If you look at it from above, it's just a small loop which runs around sort of in circles, and allows for trains just to move at pretty high speed. Have it set to 40 miles an hour for a nice effect when you're moving around Oak Island, or in here switching the Budweiser plant, which from a scale perspective is right up there with Tropicana in terms of size, and the industrial lead is accessible through this little cutout in the backdrop, which drops down behind the backdrop and then back out towards the Northeast Corridor. Right here, just past the crossing of the Northeast Corridor, CP Valley, this allows trains to diverge to the left onto the P&H branch, which heads up towards South Kearney, and then to the right into Oak Island. So from the right, you can see Oak Island, still a lot of work to do. Here at PN, you can look south, and there's Port Newark, Port Elizabeth, however you refer to it, as well as a large refinery and building out here on the chemical coast. So Oak Island is something that is, in terms of the track layout, I've changed 3 times as I've operated and tried to switch cars. So hopefully this is the last version. Here on the south side is Doritas Avenue, which is a large automotive facility for terminating vehicles. As we head out the backside of Oak Island across Upper Bay, so this is New York Bay, we hit Tropicana in Greenville, New Jersey, which is a large industry, and then this drops down as the National Dock secondary into the staging area. So the staging reaches out underneath this area here over towards the northern branch. So we'll jump back over here to the P&H real quick. We come around a curve, which I need to make super elevated for effect. You can see a lot of assets not working here in Trainz New Era from TS12. Come over Point No Point Bridge. This entire area from a scenic perspective is going to be redone. The track works good to go. I've operated it many times in TS12. I really like how it works. So it would mainly be the surrounding scenery, and then into South Kearney, which is a large intermodal terminal in North Jersey. The main line runs on the south side. There's only one track to it, so there's a nice little choke point to model. And then you can see the highway that was over here is not coming well from TS12. So on the back side, a CP Hack over the Hackensack River. It's another lift bridge. And then this is more or less the switching lead, and then into the staging area for the northern branch. The northern branch runs from just past Kearney up to CP5, where the river line begins, closer to North Bergen, which is a larger UPS terminal in North Jersey, which is currently operated by CSX. So that's basically where we are with the North Jersey route. Said a lot to do, and really I think more work to get this up to speed in Trainz New Era than I have left on the entirety of the BN Chilli Sub. So more to come. Next, we're going to head over to the BN Chilli Sub and just take a little look at the progress we've done there. So before we got back into the Chilli Sub for just a route overview, I just kind of want to go over the geography of the route for those of you who aren't familiar with the Chicago area or kind of the Midwest, as I really wasn't until I started this project. So what we're looking at here is actually the BN system map, which is available on their website. It's a great map. There's a ton of detail about their lines and a lot of maps there if anyone's interested in learning more about that railroad. But one of the things here is that, which had me really confused, is the BN has a couple ways to get out of Chicago, and 2 routes really to Galesburg. So the first route, which the Chilli Sub runs here from McCook, Corwith, this is the old Santa Fe, beginning of the Transcon, through Joliet, through LPC, down through Chillicothe, and then to Galesburg. And from Galesburg it turns to the southwest, heading towards Fort Madison. You can see it continues down through La Plata and into Kansas City. And like I said, that's the route of the former Santa Fe. And the second route they have to Galesburg is the former Burlington Northern. So this is the line that is known as the Chicago Sub, at least until Aurora, Illinois. And then I believe the southwest line is known as the Mendota Sub, which runs here to the southwest, with both lines converging in the Galesburg area. Trains going to Minnesota, Seattle, Portland, etc., break off at Aurora and head northwest out towards La Crosse, and then the BNSF hump yard at Northtown. But that's sort of how this looks. So we've got 2 parallel lines. They come together here at Galesburg. Trains for the Powder River break off at Galesburg and head west out across here towards Omaha, and really Lincoln being the gateway out to the Powder River from Chicago. And then from Galesburg they can also head south towards St. Louis, and also towards Memphis and Birmingham, which is sort of the farthest eastern point of the Burlington Northern route. So I just want to give a quick route review from a geography perspective, just as this place feels less like a model railroad and more like a place beyond model railroad, in terms of a lot of these trains that you'll see in the videos will be for areas in California, the Southwest in general, like Phoenix, as well as Texas, Alliance, Dallas, etc. So without further ado, we'll jump right back into the route overview. Alright, so I hope everyone got something out of the geography overview from the BNSF perspective in terms of what we're trying to model here, and what Bruce Carpenter modeled with his HO scale Chilli Sub. So for those of you who haven't seen the previous videos, this is the HO scale Chilli Sub. It's based on Bruce Carpenter's track plan that was in Great Model Railroads 2007, and from what I understand, reading on some forums, he's recently dismantled it and gone recreating a railroad of the Milwaukee Road, if I followed the forums correctly. So I was always obsessed with this layout, and just because of the big scale modern railroading, we're just going to kind of give a progress update on it. We're currently over the Corwith Staging Yard, which is the eastern end of the model portion. The ladder's a little tight, but that's because it's hidden, and trains still don't derail. I've tested it at 10 and 15 miles an hour. So in the entrance of space and running 20-foot trains, as you can see the ruler right there, 20.7 feet, we're just going to kind of leave it as is. In the distance, you'll see a module I'm considering doing, which is the Chicago Sub, and breaking that off from the Cicero staging area, which is underneath this bridge, and kind of making a turn for just this little module area of what's known as the racetrack. So this is the more famous of the 2 routes, at least in Chicago, because of all of the density of both Amtrak long distance service as well as Metro commuter service. And the BN runs a heavy amount of both manifest unit trains and intermodal on this line, with this line being the primary gateway to the Pacific Northwest that we talked about in our geography overview. So thinking about it, and so far I have the 3-track main line for about 60 feet. So still a long way to go if we're going to make that a serious thing. Out of staging, this was covered in previous videos. We've cut through an industrial area of Chicago. Here's Nerska Tower with the BRC crossing from left to right. To the right going towards Cicero, to the left going towards Clearing. BRC Junction Yard over here is kind of a visible switching staging. There's not going to be a lot of scenery, and the things I put up are more just for kind of a scene break. So if we keep going, this is all covered in some previous videos, so no work's been done here. A couple industries, rock quarry, and then we turn the corner towards McCook. We got a single cross over there, a couple more industries, a little branch here that serves the Budweiser plant, as well as a small steel customer. This is called Ihb Junction, where trains break off to head to the UP CPN, via the IHB. So for the UP, trains going to Proviso, or some of the global terminals will head that way. This is the UPS sorting facility right in the Willow Springs area, and then we head into Willow Springs, which I've covered a lot in videos, so we're just going to kind of skip over this for now. One of the biggest changes we have actually made the Romeoville Auto Mixing Center, and that's what's here. So it's 4 tracks, 2 unload tracks, and this is both a loading and unloading facility in the model version. The main line disappears kind of behind the seam brake and reappears. I've extended it farther than necessary so that a train will fit here in the siding. It also allows trains from Willow Springs to accelerate and be at track speed by the time they get to this area, so a little more fun that way. Past Romeoville, we head into a big sweeping curve over a small creek, and then to our first passing siding. This is where Chillicothe will be. So at this point, everything from Chillicothe to Galesburg is yet to be scenic. We're just going to kind of jump over to this side in what's now Galesburg. So Galesburg will be the end of the model portion of the Chilli Sub, and we come out of the single track into a small industrial yard, which will be served by a local, and we got a Jeep 38 sitting right there, and as well as a couple crossovers. And then at least how I'm going to treat the model portion is that this connection is going to be to the actual yard at Galesburg, and for all trains that are heading onto the former BN side, and any trains continuing on the Santa Fe Transcon will stay here on main 1 and 2. This will be used by the Galesburg BRC manifest trains, as well as any Powder River trains that serve the Illinois Edison plant that's modeled in Williamsfield. So that's where we are with the Chilli Sub. This Galesburg work was just this week. Spent a couple hours on it. Still have a little ways to go. And I'm not from farm country by any means, but trying to make some type of really rural scene here. Because this is located in a very flat, very agricultural area of Illinois. So more to come here, but now we'll head to the Conrail St. Louis line. Good afternoon, everyone. So now we're into Route 3 of the route overview. This is the Conrail St. Louis line. Kind of an obscure line in terms of what's typically modeled, or what we see a lot in the forums in terms of screenshots, etc. So people love the Pittsburgh line on currently NS, former Conroe, former Pennsylvania Road. People love Southern California, Tehachapi, Cajon Pass. And this line is a little off the beaten trail. A little background on it is my dad actually worked out on the St. Louis and Indianapolis lines of Conrail back in the late 70s. We got to bonding, watching some videos, and I just thought it was a really cool area. I wanted something that was really flat, very fast railroad, double track, but also had a lot of interchanges, you know, on one side of the railroad. So in this case, the St. Louis line feeds, as the name would suggest, the St. Louis Gateway. And if you see any videos of Conroe during the era, and I'll make a playlist of this on the channel, of some videos I found on YouTube. All types of power, from Southern Pacific, Cotton Belt, Union Pacific, Illinois Central at the time. This is prior to the CN acquisition of Illinois Central, as well as even some Sioux line stuff. So to go along with CSX having trackage rights on the line. So I just thought there was a lot going on. The trains per day is really manageable to model. It's only about 25. And the other thing I thought was really interesting was Avon. So we'll get into that here, with Avon being, you know, the major terminal on the route. So we start here in the Indianapolis line staging. So this is supposed to represent all points east of Indianapolis. So you have Columbus, you have Cleveland, and obviously anything that flows out of North Jersey and Pennsylvania towards the St. Louis Gateway is also kind of supposed to represent this. So we've got an 8-track staging yard. I've just laid procedural track as a test to kind of see how it is and how it functions, and may consider using this in some routes, just depending on how the frames hold up. So, and we're just kind of in a base session that I brought over. So this route was initially built in TS12. I never released it because I couldn't complete it before I migrated into Trainz New Era, and so I'm currently working on bringing it up to snuff. A lot of content. All the trees had to be replaced as they were no longer compatible with Trainz New Era, and so we'll head here out of staging. And the first control point we're going to hit is in real life kind of a vertical Y, and what we have here is we kind of turn back towards the staging yard. This is an area I'm currently having to redo entirely due to content issues. But what we have here is we have one leg heading towards an industrial area of South Indianapolis. This is called the transfer yard. It was really heavy on steel and automotive traffic, specifically parts, back in the mid-90s. And then to the north leg started the Conrail line out to Lafayette, Indiana. So there's a lot going on here in terms of more on the Indy transfer side. This just stub ends over into the backdrop. Won't be modeling any trains off that side, but this heads behind the backdrop to a small little industrial yard, which allows for a local to come in, run around its train, and pick up a cut to run back, or even just to kind of shove something into a track here. So just a small industrial yard. Actual name is industry yard or transfer yard, kind of depending on who you talk to. And head west here, past a couple business parks and warehouses into what's called MY Cabin. So MY Cabin is the control point on the east side of Avon Yard. This controls all movements in and out of the yard on this side, as well as the main line activity here. So what we have is we have two primary leads into the yard, one on the high side, one on the low side, and we'll walk through that. But diverging off here to the right is the runaround track. So in the modeled portion, I've tried to recreate what occurred back in the prototype in the mid-90s, which is there was actually a signaled main around the yard, which is predominantly used by run-through trains, especially the mail fleet, which wasn't having to pick up or set out here at Avon. So on the front side, we've built a little local industry switching yard. There were a lot of industries served out of Avon, and we want to be able to capture that. And we continue to head west through the yard. Obviously, the bypass track here has a run-through fuel pad, and then continues on sort of the top side. From here, the main lead sort of splits, and so to the left, we head towards the intermodal terminal, and to the right, we head towards the low side of the classification yard, and then also the lead to the locomotive facilities off the intermodal side. So as we move over, we'll kind of pause and take a look at the two yard ladders. So when I say high side and low side, we've got a high side here on the north side of the yard, which there's a crossover to allow for movement from the inside lead to the upper side. And so you can see we have this ladder here, and then this ladder here. So this is defined as the low side, this is defined as the high side in my model version. And really they're supposed to be independent. So this is supposed to handle eastbound switching, and this is supposed to handle westbound switching. Currently we've got some power for the Illinois Central run-through train later in the afternoon, as well as an auto parts train. And this would be STBN, which runs from Detroit to the BN in St. Louis for Valley Park. And so this being westbound trains working in the westbound yard, and you can see we've got also this thoroughfare, which allows for kind of movement all the way through the yard, avoiding both ladders. So the yard itself, I've put track labels down, which at the time I didn't realize showed up when you're in session mode. I'm going to make these a layer so they can be toggled on or off by users, but they're very helpful as you try and create sessions, and especially with switching activity, just to put labels of the track down. And you can see this is labeled as thoroughfare, and then we've got 1 through 9 running up through here, and this is labeled as Avon Intermodal. So Avon is pretty interesting for a couple reasons. So let's get into that here real quick. One of the nice things about it is a major classification yard. It was on Conrail. It's seen its importance to kind of de-emphasize on CSX, and some of that has just been the change in automotive conditions in terms of the business side, especially parts. Avon handled a lot of parts traffic back in the 90s, which a lot of that's gone away. But one of the things I really thought was interesting after doing some research and looking at maps was there's actually a small intermodal terminal on site at the yard. And this is pretty rare, at least from my research of other lines. in and across the U.S., the Class 1s, is that rarely is there an intermodal ramp right on the side of the hump yard. So I thought this was pretty interesting because now you're merging, switching traffic with intermodal traffic and all that, and a lot of trains coming in, picking up, setting out, and really kind of create some life around just basic single car switching, kick this, kick 1, kick 2, kick 3, etc. So we've got a small intermodal terminal, which is stub-ended, as the prototype was, just 2 tracks, and served off this lead, which is also accessible from down here at the other end of the yard, which is called CPAN. CPAN controls the west side, as we talked about. MY Cabin controls the east side of the yard. And once again, we've got a couple different leads. So we've got a little a ladder idea I got from Track Planning for Realistic Operation, which allows you to bypass the bottom ladder and just hit the top tracks, and you kind of have this lead to switch off of with everything tying kind of back in here. And then created a couple pocket tracks here for pickups and setouts of intermodal traffic. So the idea is that some of your intermodal traffic is going to get pulled from the ramp on the right side down through the lower side lead and then shoved back into one of these pocket tracks for a westbound train, and then come down through the high side thoroughfare to pick it up. You can see the main is independent of yard activity all through the terminal area, and then with just one industry here on the north side of the yard, which adds a little bit of complexity. So you got to make sure you're avoiding all the high priority modal trains when you're going to serve that industry. We have an area that had a lot of content not come over. There was a barbecue place right here and a lot of trees, which are all gone. But this is CPAN, and I've put these signals in here, which I believe are from the Chinese region, just to kind of represent shove lights or general occupancy, and add a little more kind of signaling to the yard area itself. You can see we've used invisible signals pretty much everywhere except on the leads, which I've also included on this side as well. So just wanted to add a little more color and lights to the terminal area. We've got a small, what's supposed to be an engineering kind of office over here with signal equipment and track, etc. As we continue west, like I said, a lot to be done from a tree standpoint. We head over a small creek, and the water just looks so much better in Trainz New Era with the reflections and everything like that. So right now I'm running about 30 frames per second, and hopefully that doesn't come down too much as I start adding trees. We head over another small creek, and then here into Danville, Indiana. So some of the textures you can see didn't quite come over well, and no trees. So here in Danville we got a couple industries, Shell Oil, and I've kind of put labels for all of them, a couple lumber customers, and then the first control point west of Avon. So this control point allows trains to cross over and kind of get lined up for their approach. These are number 20 crossovers, so they can be done at full speed, which is one of the reasons, like I said at the beginning, I really like this route, is you can really get out and run at high speed, and the trains look pretty good doing it. As we run west, we've got an abandoned industry here, and then one other industry here on the left side. So, and I thought I had a label for this. It is W.R. Grace, yeah, which I believe is a fertilizing company. So as we continue west, this is supposed to be the area of Danville and Fillmore, Indiana. They're really close to each other in the prototype, and we just kind of put it all as one area. Behind the backdrop is the Csx Staging Yard for their trackage rights trains, and we'll get into that here in a second as we head around the curve, which I need to super elevate now that it's in Trainz New Era, and into Greencastle. So I've done a couple videos of Greencastle, Indiana. This is where we've got a major grain customer, Merchants Grain. We also have CSX trackage rights trains entering here out of Lafayette, Indiana, on the north side of the main. In the prototype, there's a crossover to get all trains kind of necessary movement. I've removed that to make this a little more complicated and to make you kind of have to think about operating, since the next crossover isn't until you get into Terre Haute, Indiana. So in this case, we've got train GCPI staged here. This is a train that's put together from a couple cuts off TRIN excuse me, an ASIN earlier in the day with the power coming out light from Avon. So that's set up for this session where the train automatically kind of puts itself together. Here's Merchant's Green, and as we head west, the Greencastle siding ties in. As you can see, still no crossover. Once again, we've hit another area with a lot of content that just didn't come over. This used to be filled with trees and shrubbery. And then to the first of many grade crossings in North Terre Haute, Indiana. So there's a heavy industrial concentration here in Terre Haute, a lot of customers, and as such there are yard jobs and locals that are served directly out of here. The first is plastics, and then as we continue through, there's going to be a lot of grade crossings here through town, one under industry, and then we eventually get to the crossing with the Soo line. And so this era of, the era being modeled here is the mid-90s. So at this point, the Fort Harrison Road overpass covers the diamond with the Soo line. So we've built a small interchange yard back in here, which allows for the staging of coal trains, as well as any interchange traffic, which this track could be used for. So the interesting thing about this, and I've yet to make a video with the train, but I've tried to operate it a number of times, is that any Soo line coal train coming over to serve Indiana Power would actually pull down through and then have to shove back out here onto the main. And that's a fun move to make. And just ties up basically the entire interlocking in here. So I'm not sure why the track's really not showing up here. Maybe having issues just kind of loading the map, which is the draw distance I have set. But this is all interconnected with this quote-unquote invisible track being used as the primary switching lead for the small yard here, Duane Yard in Terre Haute, which is where, like I said, a lot of the customers that are in North Terre Haute and around here are used for their switching. So we've got a small yard office, employee vehicles, and then the usual, track and different storage units kind of lying around. You'll notice off to the side here, there's a grade crossing name. It's because I had a hard time keeping the numbers apart in terms of which triggers triggered which crossing. So I just went in and put some signs down, which I'll eventually remove once everything's done. Just of this is grade crossing number 17, 18, 19, etc. And you'll see those as we continue to move west. Appearing off here to the right is a major CSX artery. The CSX artery runs from Chicago down through Nashville and eventually to Atlanta. And so this is a diamond right here, Haley Tower, which was very busy and very famous. This area has been completely changed in the post-Conroe world to allow for seamless CSX operations. The diamond's gone today, and everything kind of converges into two tracks here. So I wanted to model in a time where it was a little more complicated and you had two railroads. So we have a diamond here at Haley, and this is where trackage rights trains for CSX that run to Lafayette from Greencastle diverge off here to the left. There's a 5-mile-an-hour turnout. It's very tight, and then they head towards the Csx Staging Yard. There's a small CSX interchange track here, which the locals out of Terre Haute go and serve, and then after Haley we head into the staging yard. So you can see here the two staging yards back up to each other. I decided not to connect it because then it creates too many decisions, in my opinion, for the AI to make around track marks and routing, so we've just kind of separated them for now, and they just back up back to back. To maximize the use, we've kind of combined the ladders here, so trains for the Conroe St. Louis line can utilize these three staging tracks on the CSX side and kind of provide for maximum flexibility around the use of the staging. So that's where we are with the St. Louis line. Terre Haute has pretty much been brought up to snuff for the most part, as has Greencastle, but there's a couple areas, as you all saw, in between, just east of Avon, just west of Avon, the entire Danville straightaway between Reno and Fillmore that need some work. So to be honest, in all honesty, the first route that'll get released here for Trainz in the era, at least from me, is going to be the St. Louis line. there's not much work to be done compared to the Chilli Sub as well as the New Jersey route, which we already covered. And this route is actually a ton of fun. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the St. Louis line, I'm going to do a brief overview of it in terms of where it falls in the Conrail system in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And then I'll be releasing some other videos this weekend with some train run-bys and all that. But we'll jump in here to kind of an overview of the line for those of you who aren't familiar, and then we'll do a couple random trains here at the end. So this is as Conrail looked in 1986. This is a map that I just found on the interweb, so to speak. And what we're going to focus on is how the St. Louis line, since it's a little more obscure, I just kind of want to cover it just for everyone's information in terms of where it sits and the purpose it played, as well as what areas are modeled, because it is a long way from Indianapolis to St. Louis. So in terms of how people think about Conrail when they talk about it when it existed back in the 80s and 90s, it was a big X. You had a northwest point in Chicago, a southeast point, which was really Philadelphia, northern New Jersey, northeast point in Boston, and then a southwest point in St. Louis. The two pieces of the X physically look like this. So you had your primary northeast-southwest route, which ran from Boston through Selkirk, Buffalo, down the water level route to Cleveland, and then your former New York Central, Pensy, and then as you get to North Jersey, Lehigh, Erie lines from Chicago to North Jersey. So about places like Croxton, Oak Island, etc. The two lines converge at Berea Tower, which is on the west side of Cleveland. Which would be great fun to model as a module with all the train activity. But that's where they physically looked. And so when you think about where all these places kind of fall, we've got St. Louis on the southwest side. You can see where Avon is, and then you can kind of get an idea of all the places that used to feed the St. Louis line, and those are all labeled here. So we had trains from Cleveland, from Buffalo, from Albany, Boston, Albany being Selkirk, New Jersey, Conway, which is in Pittsburgh, as well as Columbus, which was Buckeye Yard at the time, which is a working hump yard. So these are all kind of the eastern points that fed down towards the St. Louis Gateway. And highlighted in green here is what has been modeled, which is the St. Louis line. In terms of with the whole St. Louis line being green, the places that actually kind of have orange dots is actually the section that was modeled. So in this case, the route only goes from Avon to Terre Haute, and you can see those places are in orange. And then I've labeled some lines here that are relevant to the operation. So even though the line that's modeled doesn't stretch all the way to St. Louis, there are a lot of interchanges that occur between Conrail and other Class 1s that existed at the time. So working from east to west, we've covered, the CSX, the trackage rights between Greencastle and Terre Haute, the CSX Main, and the former Seaboard, which runs from Chicago to Nashville, the Sioux Line, former Milwaukee Road Line, which also crosses in North Terre Haute. And then as we continue west, you've got the former Illinois Central to Little Rock, Memphis, New Orleans, etc., which crosses at Effingham, and then a major UP route, which is a joint operation between Altamont and St. Elmo, which allows Conrail trains access to Salem, as well as one intermodal train to Dallas, which I've taken a couple videos of, which is TV 55 at the time. And then west of St. Elmo is where the traffic density really starts to drop off, because you've got a lot of trains jump on and off at both Terre Haute for trackage rights, and then run through interchange trains at Effingham to the IC and at St. Elmo to the UP. In terms of the physical locations that were covered in the model portion, we've got from east to west. We started Avon, Danville, Reno, Fillmore, Greencastle, and then Terre Haute. How those look on the route map, and this is from the Trainz view, is you've got a staging yard that handles westbound trains and then terminating eastbound trains. Avon into the next peninsula, which is Danville, Reno, Fillmore, Greencastle, which is a big area, and then Terre Haute, which is really split between North Terre Haute and Terre Haute. So I hope this has been helpful for those of you who are interested in learning more about the line, and gives a little more context to kind of why modeled something so random, as well as kind of what the general appeal is. So like I said, I hope this is valuable, and now we'll get to some run-bys.